Good morning, class. It is the 9th of November. Wow, this year has gone by so fast. And today we are looking at the definitions and characteristics of self-help groups. So we've talked a lot about leader-led groups. We've talked about task groups. So now we're going to talk about self-help groups. So if we look at what a self-help group is, or before we define it, let's kind of go back and look at what it might look like, some examples. So prior to COVID, I really used to teach this class where you had to actually go and attend a self-help group. Most often was like things like AA, or we have NAMI in this area, National Association for Mental Illness, and it provides services for both families as well as the person who has the mental illness. So in general, okay, so support groups are offered at a space where individuals can come together, share their stories, experiences, and live life a way that reduces isolation and loneliness, right? So support groups talk about universality. So I am in this group because there's someone who has the same issues that I do, okay? Support groups are open to anyone. Well, most support groups are open to anyone, let's not say that. But to find the right support group really is a matter of looking at the people. Every group has a different lifestyle. It has a different life of its own. No, it can be the same subject, but everyone is different. And you know, if you've gone to AA groups or NA groups, especially as a class assignment, right? Some of them just have a very different feel. Sometimes the population is my older men, and sometimes it's younger people. So it really just depends on where you're living and which group you prefer. So if you look at this list, this is a list of specialized support groups. All that means is that these support groups really focus on something particular. So Recovery International. Okay. So Recovery International is a drug and alcohol treatment program, as well as mental health. So it really is about, it means kind of all over, it's international, it looks like that. So again, if you decided that you wanted to attend this group, newcomers, it talks about what, let's say if I'm a newcomer. Recovery International meeting provides a safe space to receive guidance, fellowship, acceptance, and support from peers with similar problems. All meetings follow the recovery 4-step method that addresses the underlying cause of the symptoms. Through the structured meeting and encouraged from peers, participants learn to spot their anger, fearful temper, and their willpower to manage symptoms. Okay, and again, so in this one, especially in times of COVID, you definitely can attend online. Okay, and let's see here. Oh yeah, it's on a Zoom, and again, there's the concepts of it, an example worksheet. You can see that one. So the example worksheet. Oh, well, let's come back. There we go. Just trying to make it a little bit bigger, not get out of it. There we go. Okay, so this is Recovery International. And this is the worksheet. Most self-help groups have some kind of worksheet or plan or journal, so you can really look at how far you've come or how much you've changed, or even supporting others. So report a single situation or event that occurred, an everyday event when you began to work yourself up. Focus on brief description of what happened, specifically what triggered your temper and symptoms. Okay, and then you're going to report the symptoms, right? The physical things, the way that my chest felt, my heart was racing, I was sweating, as well as if you were feeling confused. So so physical and my psychological symptoms, okay? Report your spotting or fearful or anger temper, okay? Again, so this is RA, and this is, again, Recovery International, just one of the many, many support groups that are out there. I think most of us know Alateen or Al-Anon. Those are for supporters of people who love someone that has a drug or alcohol problem. ACOA, been around forever. Adult Children of Alcoholics. If you've begun to study for your degree, for your licensure, you know that Virginia Satir, that was what her research was on. She really looked at what it was like to be a child of an alcoholic. And there was very much a whole movement back in the, early 80s that really focused on adult children of alcoholics. It still is still very much a symptom, very much an issue. It is just not nearly as talked about as it used to be during the highlight of it. So again, it talks about the rules, okay? So the laundry list, we became isolated and afraid of people and authorities. We became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process, or etc. So these are the things that we're going to acknowledge as an adult child of an alcoholic. Again, you can check the meeting list. I'm not going to go down the whole list. I just want to kind of point out some things to you, right? So Association of Retired Persons, Grief and Loss, Attention Deficit Disorder Association, the Autism Society of America, Debtors Anonymous. That's a 12-step program that works very much the same way that alcohol, drug, gambling, all of those we go through. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find a meeting. Probably not one near me, but let's see here. Oh, wow. So let's say that I am a business owner and I am in debt. Let's see what I can find. Can't find my location. I guess I have to allow it. There are no meetings in my area. Let's see here. Let's try if there is a internet. I'll broaden the horizon within 50 miles. Well, it sounded really good. However, it doesn't seem to be anyone near my area. Okay, so again, if you're someone who's in debt and you're looking for, and you did notice when I went back there were definitely internet groups, right? So Skype groups, so that you can meet. So Debtors Anonymous, we're looking to help people get rid of debt or get out of debt, right? So experience in working the steps in Debtors Anonymous. So we'll look at some stories. Let's see here. Okay. So let's say this person, in the beginning, she thought Debtors Anonymous was for rich people who could not handle their money. She did not think she was good enough to be in DA. To share in DA, what could a person like her who grew up on welfare have to offer to these people who had lots of money, who just did not know how to manage it? I think that is the feeling we have of all groups, especially when we are beginning, that orientation phase, that phase of, if you're looking at Tuckman's phases, and we are forming, we're always afraid that we'll be different. We're afraid that my story will be different than yours. We're afraid that I'll be embarrassed, that I'll share all of my stuff and all of my secrets and people will laugh at me. We all have that, right? So, so now her life is much better because of DA, and then BDA is Business Debtors Anonymous. She's able to repay her creditors, take much care of herself. DA has the 12 steps, right? So it's kind of like the AA 12 steps. There's a solution when I can find the higher power. And again, the higher power with any of those 12-step groups is never meant God. It's God as you see him. Okay. There are some groups, of course, that do focus on spirituality and looking at God as maybe many people see God. The 12-step programs, when Bill W. Came up with those, it was purposeful, that it was not necessarily God, a God as we see God. Okay. So, it wasn't always easy in the beginning. She thought it was DA for rich people who couldn't handle their money. The pain she was feeling, she felt spiritually sick, especially with feeling less than. I felt that as a woman and an African American woman, and I grew up on welfare, I should keep going. But all the people in DA suggested I keep coming back, that I record my numbers, what comes in and what goes out, right? That I do a service, keeping time in meetings, being the business meeting secretary, being a greeter. And those are all the different roles that you still may take on in any group. You gave me wings to take responsibility for my life. Okay. So she says that she can be a chronic debtor, under-earner, deprivation, addict, and others, an overspender, no matter what your race, color, debit, socioeconomic status, all of those things. Her primary purpose my primary purpose is to not debit one day at a time, and to help another sick and suffering debitor to not debit one day at a time. Again, same as the AA steps, right? Same as XAA steps. I can laugh and have fun and dress abundantly and smile and dance and look at people in the eye because I am me. I still get paralyzed with fear and think people who have money or prestige or celebrity are better than me, that I need these things to be up on par. But as she does DA, she's grateful that DA gives her a clear instruction on what to do, talks about our view of character flaws, same as AA. Okay, so again, this is one of those support groups. This is Debtors Anonymous. Again, so a lot of these times, especially with COVID, you can find these online. Dual diagnosis, of course, those are clients who are both diagnosed with a mental health illness as well as an alcohol and drug treatment. Many years ago, or for many years, we really thought that we treated them separately, that we could not treat your mental illness until we actually treated the alcohol and drug use. Now we know better. Research has said that we can work on both of those things at the same time. It's kind of the issue of which came first, the chicken or the egg, but definitely both of us now are treated both the same. Gamblers Anonymous, right? That's the same kind of thing. That really is a 12-step group that we have out there. Okay, so Gift from Within, that's for post-traumatic stress disorder. So again, there are a lot of groups. I mentioned NAMI before, National Alliance on Mental Illness. We do have one of those, several of those in our area. And again, they have separate groups for the caregivers, the people who love someone with a mental illness. They have a group for the person who has the mental illness. As overall, when we're looking at schizophrenia, or many times other mental illnesses that include some psychotic or some delusional features, we really are doing a support group. If I have hallucinations or more voices in my head, I don't need someone trying to do in-depth therapeutic techniques with me, right? I just need support. I just need to learn to maybe stay on my medication, to learn to live the way that I am now. So those are very much support groups. Self-Mutilators Anonymous, okay. Sex Addictions Anonymous. We actually used to have one in our area. It was more for court-ordered people, but Sex Anonymous is the same thing as the 12-step group. Okay, so am I a sex addict, right? So that kind of looks at what the accommodations, what the rules are, and how you know if you're a sex addict. So you're powerless over your sexual addictive behavior, resulting in unmanageability of my life, feelings of shame, pain, and self-loathing, failed promises and attempts to stop acting out, preoccupation with sex leading to ritual, progressive worsening of negative consequences. Okay, so if I'm addicted to sex, if I'm in a relationship, of course, that's a problem with my partner, right? So many times my partner just sees me as cheating or being with somebody else, and when I'm an addict, like any other form of addiction, I can't stop. I can't stop. So in order to understand addiction, especially if you're in my drug and alcohol class, we follow the medical model that any sort of addiction is like breathing. So I have to breathe, and when I'm full-blown addiction, I have to use. I have to have sex, I have to gamble. So that is definitely what we look at. Whether or not there's a genetic piece has always been a nature versus nurture. We definitely know that there's some genetic connection. I think the research is out on how clear it is. I've seen surveys that talk about as much as 75% between males, between their fathers and boys, whether they were raised in the same house or not. Okay, but either way, on the medical model, we treat drug abuse, we treat any kind of addiction as a chronic behavior. So that would be the same thing as we treat like diabetes. So, diabetes is a chronic long-term behavior that you learn to adjust. So the same thing with NA and AA. The goal is to go through recovery, but many of the programs still believe that you're still an addict and you're struggling to maintain your, whether it's from debtors or gambling, any of those things. Okay. So again, there's a whole list after an attempt. Okay, that's a guide for people who have practiced attempted suicide for their families. Okay, so just as you said, there's a huge array of things that are out there, support groups. And again, so any of your clients that are looking to find people that are of the same mind, and especially again in this COVID day and age, most of these are available in online or some of those Zoom meetings as well. So I often suggest check those out. So back to the textbook, and again, so I repeated what I said. Self-help groups have been seen as support systems, social movement, a spiritual movement, a secular music. Secular religions means that it is not necessarily the same as a spiritual movement. A system of community participants, etc., etc. Okay. So in self-help groups, members have shared concerns. Like I said before, addiction, obesity, cancer are just a few of the things that people deal with. Okay. Self-help groups emphasize peer solidarity rather than the hierarchical governments. What that means is most often, and a definition of a superior group is it is led by other people that have the same illness. So in AA, the leader is the person who's been cleanest the longest, or who's still attending the group. So many times that is referred to as the gatekeeper, key holder. That is for people who really, I've been in AA for 40 years, and now I'm the pace of running it. And it's not because I'm afraid of getting out in the real world, because the 12 steps of AA talk about making sure that when I get out, I bring someone else with me. So that's the goal, is why, and we saw before in the other Debtors Anonymous story, the goal is to make sure that we, bring someone with us or help someone walk down that path. Okay. Okay. So clarification of, the classification of self-help groups. This one has two classifications. Okay. One that focuses on self-fulfillment or personal growth. That's AA, Recovery, Inc., Debtors Anonymous, Weight Watchers, right? And the other type are groups that focus on social advocacy. So that is fighting for change in society. Welfare Rights Organization, MAD, Mothers Against Drug Drivers. the Committee for the Rights of the Disabled, etc. So those are what I'm looking at when I look at focus groups that are focused on social advocacy. So if you're looking at those community or macro approaches, right, that's what that group would look like. Trying to really change the system as opposed to change just one person. Micro is looking at changing that one person, but macro or that indirective, right? So direct is working closely. Direct is working directly with the client. Indirective or macro is when I'm looking at the community, the atmosphere. So groups of mixed types, you can have different categories. Okay. There are some terms that we look at in self-help groups. Habit disturbance organizations. That's a big old fancy word for Gambling Anonymous, right? I have a habit. There are general purpose organizations. In contrast, the difference of habit disturbance organizations, general purpose organizations address a wider range of problems and predicaments. Okay, lifestyle organizations, so PFLAG, parents and friends of lesbian gays, parents without partners, widow to widow programs. So those are still support groups, but those are lifestyle organizations. Those would be considered process groups, not product groups. Process is when the healing happens during the time of group, right? We're hoping to go from that very simple Tuckman's terms, from forming to storming, norming, right? Performing, and then a mourning or adjournment. So the process groups are working through the process. When that performance stage, I'm letting my guard down. I am letting people in. I'm sharing my secrets. And many times the person who's running the groups really is trying to encourage people to take risk, encourage people to share, because at this point we're cohesive and you're not supposed to have any of that inappropriate feedback or someone laughing or making fun of you. And as in any group, the leader is supposed to protect the members. So if I do have someone who's taking a risk and another member is verbally or emotionally hurtful to the client, that's something that has to be addressed. Remember, it always has to be addressed inside of the group. We don't talk about what happens in group stays in group, whether it's a support group or anything else. Again, those are just kind of groups that we can see. Okay, some of the benefits. Okay, of course, the benefits of self-help are you learn that you're not the only one. Okay, many direct service self-help groups emphasizes this for the following members: a confession to the group that they have a problem. That would be any of my groups, whether it's AA, NA, or Parents Without Partners, any of those things. I'm going to testify, a testimony in the group recounting their past experiences with the member and their plans for handling the future. The requirement that when a family member feels an intense urge of reoccurrence, right? I'm dying to drink again, that the member will call somebody, will let their sponsor know, will let someone know this is where I'm at, as opposed to handling this by yourself. So definitely we know with any of my 12-step programs, the goal is there's a higher power. I can't control this. I need someone else to help me. So that higher power can be your sponsor, right? So we're looking at someone calling someone, meeting someone for coffee, any of those things that help us get through the current crisis or the urge to use. Okay. Some health groups, such as parents of adults with cognitive disabilities, raise funds and operate group communities. Okay. So again, lots of these things. So those who join self-help groups soon become aware of the association with caring for others who've experienced similar problems. Okay, so the benefits of having a self-help group is having a reference group. Okay, so someone else understands my problem. If I share my issue with the population or some of my friends or family, they really wouldn't get it. right? So in an AA group or an NA group, my 12-step groups, when I go, 36 hours without a drink, and I go to an AA meeting and they're cheering me on, like, yay, Pam, good, 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 right? We're good, we got you. When I've been an alcoholic and I have been drinking or ruining my family's life for the last 10 years, and I tell them that I've been clean for 36 hours, 3 days, they're like, okay, because they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. So the self-help group provides things that you won't get necessarily from your family. Okay? Gaining hope on the knowledge that other members have experienced it, confronting problems head on, taking responsibility, and putting their problems in perspective and applying knowledge and the skills from the others in the group. How you survived? How did you do this? How did you live when your partner died? What did you do when you realized your child had autism? So all of those things are support groups. And like any of the other groups, what's said in group stays in group. That's a code of ethics. The only time I'm ever going to discuss anything outside of group with a group member is if there's an issue of abuse. So if someone in the group mentions to me during group time that they have beaten their child, that they have taken money from an elderly person, their grandmother, things like that. Those are things that are safety first, because safety trumps everything in the mental health world. Safety is always first. So I'm going to call that person aside and just say, hey, you know what? I really need to report this, but there's no need to do that in front of the entire group. It can really just be done with that client. But other than that, if a client says they have an issue, what happened in group today, and if you're a professional leader, like a social worker or a mental health counselor, or even if it's a non-professional program, it's someone who is the leader of the self-help group, the answer is always going to be, we'll bring it up in group. We'll discuss it in group next week. I don't want to have any sort of relationship with any of the group members. I just don't want to have a one-on-one, because the group as all is my client. Okay. And again, some of those basic therapeutic factors, these are Borman's therapeutic factors, but most often we look at Yalom. Yalom has been around forever and ever and ever. And we look at his curative factors when it comes to why group works. Okay. And those of you who are taking a licensure test anytime in the near future, these are almost always on the test. Okay. So Yalom said that these are curative factors. Installation of hope. Some, seeing others cope with the problems similar to my own, helps me realize this can be done. You can do this. You can do this. One of the things that I do in when I'm doing some tutoring, I do tutoring in group, and it's so nice for other members to hear what the other member has gone through. Or wow, I thought I was the only one that thought it was this way. Or I thought I was the only one that felt this way. So that's also called universality. So the installation of hope, it gives me hope, and the universality reminds me that I'm not the only one having that situation. Information giving, anytime you increase my knowledge, right? So many times if I'm a debtor, gambler, any of those things, I feel awful about myself. I look back and I think, I can't believe I stole my grandmother's wedding ring and pawned it. I can't believe I did those things. So it's nice to get information, knowing about this. These are the stages of use, right? That this is, I wasn't losing my mind or falling apart, that these are the stages of the addiction. The term altruism really means I'm doing something for someone without expecting anything in return. Recovering addicts may feel inadequate as they have begun to seek, help as much as for themselves. By sharing their stories and helping others on their path to recovery, members of groups can then regain their self-esteem and sense of self-worth. So like I said earlier, once I have gone through to the other side, the goal is to bring someone else with me. So altruism is yes, I've gotten through this, or yes, I'm further down the line than you are, and with no gain to me, I'm really going to bring someone else with me, help someone else over. Okay. This always gets people corrective recapitulation of the primary family. What this really means is that if I have a negative issue with my family, brother, sister, mom, many times someone in the group can help me work through that process. It says through building healthy relationships and relying on one another, members of the group therapy review their peers as a second family member. And this model can redefine negative connotations the ideas of a family may hold for them. Members of this group can be heard, understood, and accepted. Okay, so I am not going to tell you that, when you tell me that your mother molested you or hurt you, I'm not going to tell you that's not true, like many of your other family members would. I am going to be there for you, and many times, having someone in group who is very supportive and warm, things that maybe my mother was not, really helps me heal from my past issues in a group setting. Okay. Of course, social skills, right? In social skills, you learn how to wait your turn. You learn that, we come in and, we're going to take our seat and have coffee, or maybe it's even in a structured group, right, where it's the parliamentary procedures. Any of those things, I am learning how to, I'm imitating behavior. So some of those behaviors also, we're going to look at empathy, non-judgmental feedback, and positive reinforcement. So that sounds a lot like person-centered, right? Those are Gestalt terms. He talked about, if we were non-judgmental, if we were congruent and genuine, if we had a non-judgmental stance, all of those things, and the client could heal themselves. Interpersonal learning, I-N-T-E-R, that always means with other people. So I always remind you of intercourse. Intercourse takes more than one person. So at least more than one person. So inter means a group, two people. So if interpersonal relationships are learning to work with my group, my friends, my family in a group setting as opposed to just me. For example, we had our borderline personality disorder. They have difficulty with difficulty with interpersonal learning. Okay, so group cohesiveness, that's the tightness. That's where the healing happens. When we're tight, I trust you and I let my guard down. Remember those first stages of group, the forming and the storming? I am not telling you anything, right? I'm thinking you're going to use it against me at some point. Yet even if we're in a group for sex addicts, and I know that everybody in this group has the same problem, I'm still not ready to go into details in the beginning. Now, if we've been there for a while and I know you and I trust you and we've built that relationship, then I really will tell you some of my details or some of my urges. Okay. Catharsis is a Freudian term. Catharsis is an emotional release, like right? Letting out some pent stuff. So releasing conscious and unconscious feelings through therapeutic relief with the supportive members. Group therapy can provide a chance to release pent-up emotions in a safe and supportive environment. Catharsis is, while it is definitely a Freudian term and is used as one of Yalom's tools, is very much like Gestalt, right? Because Gestalt talked about getting rid of the unfinished business, right? So mom who hurts you and she's sitting in that chair, and you're letting go. You're telling mom all the things that, you did this to me, you did this to me, you did this to me, but I'm going to recover from this. So that cathartic release can be a talking to, it really can be just an emotional release, like a tear, a yell out, all of those things. And the existential factors. So if you remember existential psychology by Viktor Frankl and Rollo May, they look at what is my purpose, what is my meaning in life, why am I here? So in this one, the existential factors are members are able to work together at understanding life's uncertainties, such as death, grief, loss, and love. Okay, so that is Yalom, and he is my 12-step guy. I'm sorry, he is my curative factor, not 12-step. Again, so some of those keys. Because a self-help group is often more effective than one-on-one counseling or group therapy in treating some problem behavior, it is of vital importance that social workers relate to them constructively. Social workers, counselors, any of the people in the mental health field need to be aware of the self-help groups available in your community so you can function as a broker, right? Brokering a relationship between those two people, or even a case manager. Remember those rules of case management? I'm going to, when I'm going to refer a client to a resource, the first thing I'm going to do is check the client to make sure that they're okay with this resource. Give the person the resource and then follow through. So, a month later, a week later, whatever appropriate, I'm going to follow up with my client and make sure they're happy with the services they're providing. So those are the steps of case management. So that would be one of the things you're doing linkage with social workers. Another function is you can perform with self-help groups or is to work as a consultant. Okay, so like I said, in many self-help groups, there's not a leader, not a professionally trained leader. Okay, so if you do have someone in there or someone who's not a professional trained leader, then the professional person can act as a consultant. And that just means that the leader is maybe bouncing ideas off of me. What do you think if this happens? I'm used as their backup plan to support them as they're going through this process. Again, so should you want to start a self-help group, and that used to be an assignment in this class pre-COVID, so we had to really look at making sure that it was a viable group. So the following questions should be answered. What the goals of the group? What kind of services should provided to meet the goals? What are the services? What are the criteria for membership? Cost? Where will the group meet? How will the potential members be contacted, right? How we're going to reach out to them and get them to attend my group? What are the procedures for joining and leaving the group? What kind of organizational group should there be, right? So all of those things. One of the other things we talk about, and I was teaching this in class, is it feasible, right? We talk about SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, SMART, I know this one, I really do. I'm going to choke it up to this morning, and I haven't had coffee, and only finished with about halfway through my sample diet tea. I think I could do a commercial. Yes. Maybe I could be a blogger. So, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So that's how we're setting goals. So then, when I have a lot of students in the past who have come up with these great ideas, for example, that always the single men or the fathers who are not involved in their lives or single fathers. While that sounds really great, I have to have a reason, a carrot, something for them to come. What's in it for me? The assignment we did in class was they couldn't be court ordered, so you had to come up with a way to engage the men. I had a student a couple of years ago came up with a really good idea. He suggested that they meet at a basketball gym, right, to play basketball. He said they would kind of, start off shooting some hoops and introducing themselves and talking to each other. And, when they got winded, then they would kind of sit down and continue the conversation. So that was a great way to reach men, okay? If you're looking at children, trying to do a group of children, you always have to think about transportation. And again, I hear, I'll do it in the school system. I'll do it in the school system. So many schools will not let you, and especially at this time of year because we're studying for those end of the year exams. So then your choices are to pull them from lunch or pull them from one of the elective activities, art, Spanish, PE. Most kids don't like to be pulled during those times. They want to come out of the instructional times. So again, those are all things to think about when you're developing a group. Also, if it's going to be a group that has young families, then I need to provide childcare. As a single parent, I do remember there are things that I just could not attend because I didn't have a babysitter. So having a childcare is the most wonderful thing ever. Celebrate recovery is one of the larger, it's not just alcohol, it's my hang-ups, my habits, so that is that for you. So celebrate recovery is the one that I talk about. Back the big picture. Okay. Celebrate recovery definitely is different in AA, that it is based on religious principles. It was actually started by I need coffee this morning, right? Rick Warren, he's the one that he wrote he's from the Saddleback Church in California. He is the one that wrote Purposeful Living, right? Purpose, gosh. Here we go. Purpose-Driven Life. So that's what he wrote. If you've not read that book and done the journal, I highly suggest it. Not as an assignment, it's just really good for people who are kind of struggling. Okay, so the Purpose-Driven Life looks at, the plan where you're going. So he then also came up with Smart Recovery. And in order to be, it's only for churches, and in order to be in Smart Recovery, usually a group of your church members or several people have to go for an official training. It really is looking at not just drug and alcohol abuse. It's called hurts, hang-ups, and all of those things. Let me see here. I'm a huge fan of Celebrate Recovery, and also because I do have very strong religious beliefs. And it's nice to believe that there's a higher power, and the higher power for me would be God. So that for me works. But as we've talked about, many of the other programs work where you're at. And one of those, whether it's a mental health or a social work, the group is always talking about client self-determination. How do I want to do it? We can't push our views and beliefs down a client's throat and expect for that to work out. Okay, so again, Celebrate Recovery, when it comes to their steps, you'll see it's Christ-centered. It always talks about what scripture would help me get through that. Let me see if I can find one of those. As I was talking earlier of Celebrate Recovery, so one of the things that worked so well is we had a place that took care of the children. And the children were actually getting lessons on drug and alcohol use, emotional abuse, things like that, to prevent them from becoming those same patterns. Or in my older kids, right, to make sure that they were not repeating the same patterns. Okay, again. So these are, they're based on the 12 steps. However, there is a very biblical part of that. So spirituality plays a role. So we admit we're powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors. Our lives have become unmanageable. which is pretty much the same as the regular AA, but in this one there's scripture. I know that nothing good lives in me that is in my sinful nature. For I have a desire to do what is good, and I cannot carry it out, and that is from Romans 7:18, and that means the NIV version. 2, we've come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore our sanity. So, for it is God who works in you it is God who works in you to will and to act accordingly to his purpose. That is from Philippians. Number 3, we've made a decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. Same thing in 12 steps. Scripture, therefore I urge you, brethren, in a view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. So, meaning that my body is a temple, and I have to make those sacrifices, learning to be clean so I don't harm the temple that God gave me. Okay, so I'm going to use my body as a sacrifice to the holy, to holy and to pleasing in God's sight. That again is from Romans. Okay, same thing as step 4. And I've said step 4, many people don't get past that step. Right? We've made a decision to we've made a searching and fearless more inventory of ourselves. Whew, okay, so many of you have never been addicts or drug users, not in addicts of any kind. I mean, like shopping, porn, any of those things, gambling. So if you've never been an alcoholic, imagine what your dirty secrets look like. Things that you've done that you wish you shouldn't have done, things that you would never tell anybody about, right? So imagine that if you're not a user. And then like double that and triple that if I'm a user. You know, I've stole from my grandmother. I've sold my baby's formula to get cash. Had a woman tell me, an older woman at one point, that at Christmas time, and she was a grandmother, at Christmas time, she knew which of the houses, which she could tell them by the house whether or not they had kids. And she would break in and she would steal the games, like the PlayStation, any electronic things, and go sell them for her drug and alcohol use. So those are the things that you have to make a moral inventory of. And many people, and that's hard. So for many years, I have numbed myself, whether it's with drugs, alcohol, sex, food, any of those things, I've numbed myself. And now you're asking me to unnumb myself, give it all to God, and admit to myself, first of all of my wrongdoings. So some people have a book, right? I'm still writing. I shouldn't have done this, I did this. There's like a book of things. But, so first of all, we're going to do the fearless moral inventory. Okay, Lamentations says, let us examine our ways and teach them and let us return them to the Lord. So 5 gets even harder, right? 5 says, now that I have recommended all of my issues, I really have to, I've got some network issues, wow, this is recording. While I'm doing that, I really do have to tell someone else. Oh my goodness, telling my grandmother that she thought that, someone broke in the house and stole her antique diamond ring and it was me, that's a tough one. That is extremely a tough one. I think I lost it. Go back and see if I can share my screen. It looks like I've lost web connection for today, guys. I do apologize. Those in my classroom to look through, again, another example of self-help groups. Okay. Again, online self-help groups, I mentioned that before. That's always been the case, but since COVID hit, definitely more we're seeing that, okay? Again, those are some exercises for my class to do when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, this was chapter 8 on the goal of chapter 8 was to look at self-help groups. It's been a pleasure, guys. I'm not sure if you can still see this or see me or not. But it is time for me to wrap this up. So thank you very much. And I will see you next week in class, or maybe later on somewhere on the